me, like when I grew up in the South, and so, you know, when I talk to family, when I talk to friends, a lot of conversations around people who are unhoused come straight to things like work ethic and individual, you know, performance. But when the subject changes to someone who has worked their whole life, has a pension, has Social Security, and still can't afford housing, then it starts raising these bigger questions. It's like, maybe there is a systemic problem here. And so we just thought it'd be really interesting to focus on this particular demographic. One, because we felt like it was underrepresented, and two, because it felt like it might disarm some of our audience.
How did you find your subjects?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was so hard, and I'm so grateful for Bronwyn, Jerry, and Herbert. I think, as a general rule, older adults are a little wary to share vulnerable life experiences, especially while, you know, living outside, and like we were not a priority at all. And so, like, the short story is we went through a couple organizations in Portland that do a lot of grassroots work. And so there's one street library called Street Books, and that's how we found Jerry, because Jerry loves to read, and so he was good friends with these street librarians. And Bronwyn we found because she works with a street newspaper called Street Roots, and Herbert was through a local community activist. But I think one thing that's really special about this film is there was no plan B. Like, it wasn't like we had 50 candidates, and we were like, oh, these are our top ones. Like, it was just Bronwyn, Jerry, Herbert. Those were our options. And they were just so brave and courageous to share their lives with us. And it's been really special. I feel like we've still maintained a good relationship with them, and I count them as friends. Like, we just went and had breakfast with Herbert the other day, his family, and things like that. So, and I do want to share, because it's exciting that Jerry got housing about 3 months ago. And so Jerry is stably housed, and Herbert just got rent assistance through another organization, and so he's able to stay in his apartment for another year. So it's really exciting that everyone is stably housed at the moment.
And is Bronwyn, she remains in her apartment?
Yeah, Bronwyn, I mean, with Section 8, Section 8 is awesome, because after living somewhere for 2 years, you can stay on Section 8 pretty much indefinitely, and even if you start making income, then it'll adjust your income, but you'll still have Section 8. And her daughter just had a baby in Wisconsin, and so she's hoping that in a few years she might be able to move to Wisconsin and take her Section 8 with her, which is a really lucky part of federal funding.
I would love anybody to join in on this next question. Something that really struck me about Bronwyn specifically is that when she's unhoused, and then obviously when she's housed, she puts a lot of effort into her appearance. And I think it really plays with a stigma, a stereotype that some of us have. I mean, was it Bronwyn who mentions that the giveaway is the hands being dirty. And her makeup is so beautifully done. I mean, I can't do my eyelashes like that. So how does that, I guess talk about that a little bit. It really plays with the stigma.
I can speak from a shelter environment that one of the things that women appreciate when they come into shelter, even if it's an overnight shelter, is a place to clean up, a mirror to use, a place where they can arrange their things, look in their purse without fear of somebody grabbing things. Just that little bit of humanity, a wash basin, a mirror, means a lot to the guests at our shelter.
I love how I think 2 out of 3 of your subjects mentioned access to bathrooms specifically, which is, I think, such a huge thing. I know just from talking to Sarah, and I think also sleep in general is something I've learned from you, is that many unhoused people are frequently woken up all night, whether it's because of a train or getting moved. They're only getting sleep in hour, 2-hour segments, and that obviously leads to the issues you were talking about, how you can age so much faster. David, I wanted to specifically ask you about your experiences in Egan. You do a lot of work with Egan. They just activated for the first time for the season last weekend. What brought you to your work with Egan?
there's so many small facets that have kicked into it. I guess cleaning rivers. And after the death of my wife's son, finding veterans living in squalor along the riverbank. And I told myself I could make a change. Even if it's one person's life, I can make a change. And started doing outreach. And from there, a lot of other things grew from that.
One of the things that I know that you have spoken about, Sarah, and that I think that it seems like everybody has this experience, is when you do outreach to a population, what is it like to gain trust and to be able to be let in and say that I am someone who's going to come back, I'm someone who's going to be here, I'm going to show up, I'm going to help you.
Well, I can tell you right now that I've been out on a project during the summer, and I'm going to get back to it. I have a project called The Many Faces of the Unhoused, which I am trying to put a face to the unhoused in a way that has not been done, but to try to make a bigger point that institutionalized greed, between that and the militarism, has a lot to do with this. A whole lot of folks, since I've been here since 1984, I have watched the population of the homeless grow massively. And we cannot put a distinction of mental illness on this problem. Greed has a lot to do with this. And so, you know, the other part of this that bothers me is that while we have an epidemic going on, we also have what is touted to be the richest nation in the world. 78% and growing are 1 to 2 paychecks away. What do you think is going to happen as greed continues to live freely as it's doing right now?
One of the things Bronwyn mentioned is at the very beginning of the movie, and I heard it when I watched it earlier this week, and then I heard it again tonight, is, actually I wrote it down, where once we were weird. And I know we've all seen that bumper sticker, right? Keep Portland weird. I think there's another one, keep Austin weird. I'm sure Eugene has one too. We like our unique cities. I grew up here and spent a lot of time in Portland because that's where I had family. But Portland has changed a lot. So, you know, from going there in the 80s and the 90s, and obviously I'm just visiting family, so I'm not seeing the whole city, but it has changed a lot. And I have seen friends move up from California because it's a great place to live. Why would you not want to live here? You can have so much more house here. You can sell your house in California. To keep Portland weird and that flavor you're talking about, you know, but now people have discovered it. And there's great coffee shops and restaurants, but with that comes another element of there's not housing anymore for a certain category of people. And this, I think the same thing's happening in Eugene too, it's just smaller. How does that feel to experience that? I guess the three of you guys who I just do a lot of work with the community here.
In the course of my time here, I moved here in 1992. I've had family has been in Oregon for a really, really long time. But I moved here from Austin, and at that point, Austin and Eugene had equal rents, pretty much, and home prices. And in the time that I've lived here, it's gone from a single mom can work 20 hours a week as a waitress in a reasonably decent mid-level restaurant and support her child and have a place for them to live, to people who are working full-time for minimum wage cannot afford to rent a room in a house. And it was right about, I want to say 2010 or 2011 when I started noticing a growing number of homeless elders. And maybe they were there before then and I just hadn't noticed, but the number has been growing and growing. And then also on the opposite side of that, none of my kids' friends, my kids are in their 30s, and none of my friends' kids can afford to live here anymore. And what am I facing myself if what I've got going on right now skips a beat, falters? It has become impossible. And when I hear people blaming and shaming, it just makes me so sad. I get angry too, who wouldn't? But mostly sad. There's so many people that could take this chair and do an even better job of telling you about what's going on. So, but I'm the one that got called at the last minute because somebody else couldn't come. And so I'm just trying to hold that space and respect for all the people that I know that are struggling so hard just to live. We can make this better, but we have to stop shaming. And we have to start recognizing each other's humanity. And we have to start recognizing when we're doing things that are causing other people to have no place to grow old. And be willing to give back, to share what we've gained, instead of being greedy.
You've done a lot of work in the community. Sarah sent me a very impressive long list of organizations that you've worked with. In your experience, what are the things that are, you talked about what the causes are. What do you think is behind it for in the people that you speak to?
Well, there are a number of causes. One of them is several of them were brought up in the movie. There has not been an investment in providing housing that is affordable, and especially housing that is permanently affordable. A lot of the housing that is capital A affordable is only affordable for 20 years, and then they can charge whatever they want for it. Because, that's what the grant was for, that's what the subsidy was for, was 20 years. And we've seen here in town, there were a lot of units of housing that were permanently affordable, that were owned by the housing authority, that got sold off because they had not had the whatever resources they needed to maintain the maintenance on the properties, and they couldn't afford to bring them back up to code, so they sold them, and we lost that permanently because those were snapped up and redeveloped into for-profit housing, rental housing. And a relatively small percentage of that is greed of people in our community. A lot of it is greed of people who don't live here. A lot of it is greed by proxy growing share of corporate ownership of rental housing. And it's not even just the cost, it's the other requirements. It's perfect credit rating. It's never having had an eviction, because if you have any strikes against you, you can't compete against brand new U of O student. You can't. And I know people who had a drug charge 25 years ago who still cannot get into rental housing unless they know the landlord. Because even though that particular substance is legal now, that makes no difference in their record. I mean, if they could afford to go through all the steps to get it expunged, maybe. So that's an example of some of the barriers. Other barriers, people just not thriving well enough in school. People having had family issues. I've met quite a few people in my general age range, 50s and up, who lost everything nursing a parent through a final illness. And then the parent didn't, not enough equity in the house gets sold, and after the parent passes, and it's all gone. What was big right after Occupy? Homeless carpenters. And it only takes a couple of weeks to get all your tools stolen if you're living in a tent. By the way, Bronwyn's tent, I'm so glad that she has housing, and everyone who does not have housing deserves to have housing. And Bronwyn's tent was heaven compared to conditions here in Eugene, because she was able to maintain it over time. She wasn't getting rousted and all her belongings thrown away every few days.
Can I ask actually, Davey, is that, and then I will get to Rico, is her situation unusual? Because I noticed that as well.
Yeah, so she was unhoused for 8 years, and she just had that larger tent for about the last 2 years of it. And again, Bronwyn, her repeatedly, she felt very much like she wanted to make a home wherever she was, with art, with tea, with, the first time I met her, she was always dressed impeccably, always better than I was dressed. And so yeah, that large tent was through a friend at Street Roots, which is the street newspaper she was a part of. And so the last 2 years she lived in that, and survived like 3 sweeps that came through. I mean, for example, like Jerry, the reason Jerry doesn't sleep in the tent is because he just couldn't stop getting swept. He would get swept, as you were saying, every few days, and eventually it was just like, this is it. I'm not worrying about tents, I'm just gonna sleep under awnings. And so that's where he slept the last couple of years, because he just couldn't live with getting swept so often.
And speaking of these sweeps, Sarah had sent me a discourse from the Dr. King Center, 365 Nonviolence, and they point out that the actions, like what the city is doing constantly, of telling the unhoused where they can't be, but never telling them where they can be, trying to stop feeding them, this is all a form of violence against them. So this is a real deal. And because of this, I feel it's absolutely prudent to raise a challenge to City Council and the county commissioners which my challenge, I know they're not gonna do it, but my challenge is 5 days, 5 nights on only $50. Go somewhere where no one is gonna help you. Come back and let us know the level of discomfort, the lack of sleep, where you're gonna try to clean yourself, eat, everything that you can't do in a home. If you don't know what it's like, stop making policies that are gonna affect the in-house. And that is really, I mean, I have to ask these folks, is this the kind of community you want to foster? Because what you're doing is a lot of violence to a whole bunch of people that don't have what we have right now.
I actually have another follow-up question for you. Rico, you're an artist.
Well,
Among many other
Yes.
things. Yes, I should not just say that. Multifaceted. One of the things that I have 2 retired parents, and they're pursuing whatever they want to pursue, you know? And I think that every subject in this movie talks about this, you know, that stereotype of when you're retired, you're rich and you can do whatever you want and pursue your passions that you don't have time to do when you're raising kids and working. Part of being retired, I associate now as someone who works a little too much, is being able to pursue creativity. And it takes so much effort to live that seems like that's missing. And what that does to people's spirit. Can any of you speak to that?
I gotta tell you one thing, you know, you're talking about that. Literally every night when I go home, I turn that heater on, I get warm, I get my guitar warm. All right? I have all of that stuff where I can do what I want to do. I was homeless for a while. I lived in a van for 2 years. And I, you know, made a bed where I could stash my guitar under that bed. I got creative in the van, but it wasn't easy. I'll tell you what, I got moved constantly. I got tickets constantly. Ask me if I gave a shit. When you're trying to survive, and you have to survive on the streets, without a whole lot of compassion from the community, it can be really, really difficult. And I've been out, my project, Many Faces in the In-House, you had asked, how do you gain trust? I've talked to a whole lot of people. I've been out offering $5 to anyone who agrees to my model release form. I made this frame. I'm 101 in of the 400 I want. I made this frame that's 4 feet long by 2.5 feet wide. And in the middle, on the very top, is a mirror. And that mirror, when the photo exhibit happens down the road here, that mirror represents the folks that walk by and are looking at, 78% may be homeless soon because you're living 1 to 2 paychecks away. So I'm trying to make this bigger point, and the bigger point that I'm really after, I have a knack for making things happen. I've done a whole lot of stuff here. I am hoping that one day, next year, I can cause a one-day boycott against corporate greed. One day. Make it happen. I'm making a serious effort to make it happen nationally. I'm trying to get everybody to wrap their heads about what's really happening with greed. Greed is the factor to a lot of all of this. So that's where my head is at. And like I said, I have a knack for making things happen, and I seriously hope that by next fall I make it happen. But it's going to take a lot of cooperation. I mean, you know, the Dr. King Center has really pounded in my head that the real way around all of this is through nonviolence. We'll never get anywhere with violence. But if we do it in a nonviolent, disobedient manner, and for the boycott, you don't even have to leave your house. If you need gas, get gas the day before. Shop small business, but just stay away from big business and send those suckers a message. It just takes one damn day to do it.
One of the other factors, I will say, there are many, and I think when you speak about, some of the development that's happened quickly, there is a point there. One of the other factors that I have spent a lot of time hearing from Sarah about is that the system to get housing can feel Kafkaesque sometimes, and some of the subjects spoke about that in the movie. I actually spoke to the Reveille Foundation, who works out of the Eugene station, LTV's Eugene station, connecting mostly veterans with services and housing. And the director of the Reveille Foundation said that there actually are services in this community. It's just a matter of accessing them. That's the problem, is getting people connected with the services, that they exist, and maybe not enough, and we for sure need housing. But I think that it seems like one of the things that could be changed is to make the system easier to navigate. David, is that something that you do a lot of in your work with Egan community supported shelters?
I wear a lot of hats in this community. One of them is Egan. The other one is my program, Hope on Wheels. We started 14 years ago. It's a veteran-focused outreach. And the other one is working with Carry It Forward. We cherish our caseworkers because over time, our caseworkers learn how to navigate that maze for their clients. We learn how to coach the clients for that interview. We find the little picadillos in these programs that our clients fit. Those are the clients that we're aware of. The ones that you see trudging their backpack every day, they're not connected to those services. They don't know where to reach out to those services. And through the process of whack-a-mole, who doesn't know what whack-a-mole is? Thought so. Through the process of whack-a-mole, losing their possessions, losing their paperwork, losing their ID, if they dare leave their tent during a time when it gets swept, can put somebody on the street back a year trying to get those documents replaced. And guess what you can't get if you don't have the right documents? Housing.
Over half of the clients at Egan are seniors. I did not know that. How has that changed over the years? Is that a statistic that has adjusted?
I still hold hope in my mind that last year's ice storm really woke up people, particularly in Springfield, at the matrix of what that makeup was at the only open shelter in Springfield. At how quickly so many elder people became unhoused that quick. 12 years ago, we had, I'm going to make some rough estimates here, please nobody hold me to it. 12 years ago, when I started volunteering, it was a little church in Springfield. Moved a bunch of times since then. By the way, we're about to lose the home in Springfield for the Warming Center. This is our last year. But about 12 years ago, the makeup of the guests that we were seeing was maybe 5% elderly. And I say elderly because on the street, at 50, you're old. You are coming close to the end of your life when your years double living on the street. 12 years ago, 5 to 10% of our visitors, our guests, were elderly. There was a huge crowd of young skateboarders, bikers, wanderlusts. Some folks chose to live that way. Some folks took that route because of pressure at home, loss of a partner. The last ice storm, last year's demographics, I'm going to try and get as close as I can off the top of my head. 30% the 35% were over 50. If we had 50 guests in a sleep room at night, you could count up to 10 walkers in that room. Walkers or wheelchairs. In a warming center. These are people living on the street. That's not going to change. That's going to get worse. The loss of a partner, a hospitalized illness will take you out of housing. A tree branch coming through your roof that you can't repair will take you out of housing. The road to homeless is really short and really quick. The road out of homelessness is a maze that only the most educated, the most intelligent, or those really hooked up can maneuver.
Back in the 90s, early 90s, before Egan warming, I'll never forget one very, very cold winter where the warming center was at the Armory. And I could not believe the numbers of folks who were living in their cars with their kids. Those numbers were really, really huge. And I would find out later that a school like 4J was underreporting how many kids were actually homeless. I mean, families, whole families, 3,000 people showed up that night because it was so damn cold. And a lot of them were families at the time. We have an epidemic going on, a serious one. I mean, like, super serious.
When my daughters are on break from school, and this was in elementary school, this was the first time I heard of this, we had to do food drives every single time there was a vacation, a long weekend, winter break, spring break, because there were about 40 families out of the 400 at our school that meant that by not having school lunch and school breakfast, that those kids wouldn't be eating. So it was up to the school, not 4J, the school, to do a food drive, and then several parent volunteers to pack everything up and anonymously deliver them to schools. Families are another, huge area of concern. I think what's interesting about seniors being homeless is that those are two populations that are considered invisible. Seniors separately and the unhoused population, and then when you put them together, maybe they're double invisible. I don't know how to say that. How do you go about taking a population that is invisible and making them visible? How do you bring attention? Movies like this, obviously, great place to start, by letting everybody else know that they're there.
Adoption.
Well, like for me, my project, to put a face to the unhoused in a way that has not been done. And I intend to use it to do several things. To, once again, go at it with the city. I've done it several times. I've pissed a whole lot of people off in the process, but I'm more tempered now in my elder age, But I'm still going to piss people off because they need to be pissed off to wake up. I am so sick of people making policy for folks that can't help themselves right now. If you're going to keep pushing them out, I had raised a question to City Council back in the 90s. There should be a collaboration between the state, the county, and the cities. Buy a property. Don't be for profit all the time. Buy a property, put 5-story and social services in a program where it keeps people in housing. At least make an effort to do that. They're not making this effort. They keep talking about, we're making affordable housing. Bullshit. None of it is affordable at this point.
Can I ask a question about getting housing, actually? This is something that I need some lived experience help with. From the learning that I've done just over the past year, especially with Ms. Koski, one of the things that I have learned is that just getting a home is not necessarily a key. Because once people are in a house, they also may lose a community that they depended on to keep them clean, to keep them happy, to keep them on the straight and narrow, whatever it is. Can you speak a little bit about that? Like what that, because housing is obviously important, but then so is the community angle of it. How do you get both?
You don't let go of them. Their peer mentor needs to be there. The community needs to be there.
Yes.
One of my earlier experiences getting this couple into housing, I thought, I'm going by where their apartment is. I'm going to pop in and just see how they're doing. And they're sleeping on the floor, paper cups in the kitchen,
Yes.
with nothing but their house. Again, that's a society and organizations not following through. I followed through. I brought sleeping bags and beds and what I could do to help them, and then contacted St. Vincent's and found resources where they could go shopping and things like that. But then the next problem came up. They didn't have a vehicle. How do you get furniture to an apartment if you don't have a vehicle? There's so many pitfalls to once they're housed, to staying housed, getting comfortable, staying warm. A story in social media that I'm working with out of Sweet Home. A disabled woman, bedridden, with an 80-year-old husband. Their circuit breaker keeps tripping in their RV. They've got a 30-amp RV. They're living in a park. They're freezing. So neighbor went to check on them, and they were shivering in their house because they couldn't run a heater that wouldn't trip their breakers. And all the social media, all the keyboard warriors out there, well, somebody drop off propane. Somebody take him a blanket. They're missing the fact this guy's 80 years old. How is he going to move propane tanks?
Right.
How is he going to dump his tanks? How is he going to maintain that house? There was no community to help support that. And I was serious about the adoption comment. There's a place for that. We have unhoused youths, teens, middle-aged people who would love to have an elderly mentor. Social services could start pairing these two together. The elder person would live better, have somebody there watching over them. The younger person would get a foothold into housing, maybe a job, maybe an income.
Do you see any models of beginnings of something like that? Have you seen any models of something that has whispers of that in the community?
I don't know the name of it, but there is an intergenerational apartment building in Portland that I think is an excellent model. There are elders living there that could not afford to live elsewhere. There are young parents living there that are low income and need to be able to have some level of supervision for their children while they work, while they do things around the apartment complex that need to be done as well. And so the pairing of these young families and these elders means that all of them together can thrive. And to be able to do that well, it takes a lot of social support to all of the people. We need networks of social support, people that can be friends, people that can give a ride, people that can help make it so that people can be better friends for each other. There are all sorts of good examples. Most of them are not in the United States, it must be said, but there are a lot of really good examples of how to build social support in a community so that people get the care that they need. And of course that has to include some people that it's their paid job, but none of us who have worked in the field can do it all. And I think the most important thing that we need to get better at is cooperation. We've got everything else. all the information about how to do anything is available, but the experience and the skill to actually do it without ripping each other apart is what we lack. And if we can take some of the good examples that are out there and start learning to help each other well, and reduce the amount of constant damage that's being created by misguided enforcement. I think that's key, because you can help a person 50 times. But if somebody with a paycheck and a uniform is making sure that none of those times are successful in getting them anywhere better, it tears you to pieces. It just does. And you know, I don't want to bring up too much of this, but one of the things this community really needs, and I think probably lots of communities need, is mental health support for caregivers, whether we're volunteer or paid. None of the little nonprofits we work for, or even the big ones, have any level of mental health support for dealing with this level of trauma on an ongoing basis without becoming completely burnt out or heartless. You can lose compassion, not because of what you know is right and wrong, but because your heart has been hurt so many times. You help someone and you help someone and you help someone and you help someone, you still can't get them into housing, and they die because they couldn't get into housing. And how many times does that happen before you have to take a step back? And if we don't have any support in continuing to do that work, and if we continue to have people that are making it harder instead of better, I don't know what we're gonna do. So it's the cooperation and the care that we need help with.
Speaking to what she was just talking about, I just read an article about Finland, what Finland has done to eradicate homelessness. They not only built a bunch of affordable housing, but for each person, they had a friend to keep them going. And guess what happened? 80% of these folks have reintegrated into society, all have jobs, and are living great lives. That is what we need right here.
I was able to tour. No, I don't think so. I don't think we have this time. No.
Just panel.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get a tour of Everyone Village and to sit in on their on their lunch, on their weekly lunch, their weekly meeting. And I was struck, what really hit me the most, aside from the really delicious food, and I think there were some excellent Rice Krispie treats, was the sense of community and how everybody was so supportive of each other. Someone admitted a mistake in front of everybody, there was some question about like who had left us out, and it was so supportive, and people were so gracious with each other. And it was a really obvious lesson for me of like, this is a potentially lonely experience, and when you have community, it's mental health, right?
Success rate goes way up in communities involved.
Exactly.
So, 2 questions to end with. I'm going to go one at a time because I never want to ask 2 questions in one. How do you take care of your mental health? How do you were speaking about how you need support for, working in this population? How do you take care of yourselves? Also, Davey, as someone who films this movie, what do you do to take care of yourselves?
Honestly, I'm struggling right now. Because somebody living on my patio that I tried to help.
Put the mic up.
I'm struggling right now because, one, I see repeated death on Highway 99. One of those on the first was a woman that I had on my back patio, trying to get her a foothold. And she was hit by a car on the first on Highway 99 and not found immediately. Her funeral was on the 17th. When you get close to the people that you try to help, it's hard to unbridge. It's hard to get away from that. I love handing somebody the keys to a shelter, keys to their solution. But the ones that don't make it are the ones that stick with you.
Well, I'm not proud to say this, but I had to take a step back. And I decided to go back to school. And what I'm working in the direction of is helping, but I had to take a step back and help the people around me as I go through my day as much as I can. And yeah, there are homeless college students too. But I couldn't keep doing it. And it wasn't that the guests at the place that I worked were so difficult. Some of them were. They were really difficult. But that wasn't what was hard. What was hard was watching their efforts go unmet. And they would try, and they would try, and they would try, and they would not get anywhere because there just wasn't the support. And it was so sad. And so, you know, I'm in college to learn multimedia design so I can help share people's stories and I can help bring attention to solutions that work. Because I can't claim credit for what it became, but I was one of the first people at the table dreaming up Opportunity Village. And I saw what the power of just going ahead and trying could do. And for a while there were stories that went out all over the world, and people started their own versions all over because of what people here in Eugene did. And they saw this example and they thought, I can do better than that, we can do better than that. And they were right, because they were in a different place and that our solution might not be perfect for them. But the story helped, and this movie we just watched is amazing. And if we could bring stories of solutions along with to inspire people so that they don't give up, so that they think of the next right thing they can try. That's how I work on my mental health around this, is to work on weaving a basket that can carry all these stories.
Well, I will tell you that from 86 to 97, I was constantly active working with the in-house, but 97, I had no answer how to solve it. and I was really super frustrated. I also had a daughter at the time, and it gave me the excuse to bow out for a while. As I'm back now, I will tell you that while I've been out, I've talked to a whole lot of people. They got stories. Every one of them has a story. And I'll tell you, you know, in the process of offering $5 for my project, 99% of the 101 that I've already done, they didn't give a crap about the $5. They actually cared about what I was trying to do, to give them a voice, to give them a face, you know. So my position, I'm not a religious person, but everybody has a soul. Not one of us are privy to understanding why we are who we are. And I feel it's just downright pathetic to be judging a soul's human experience. There's a lot of evil in this world that causes all of this stuff to happen. Greed is one of them, one of the bigger one of them. So we need a community that has a level of compassion that is not happening right now. And that's what I'm trying to create here. But if you guys want to hear some stories, go talk to some of these folks. If they gain your trust, they'll tell you their story. And some of these stories are heartbreaking. Some of them you're going to laugh your ass off because they're being damn funny about it. And I love that part of them that, hey, my situation is screwed up, but I got a lot of humor behind this whole thing. I'm ready. Well, I had a car accident that kind of slowed my deal down, but I'm going to be back at it really quick here. I am really excited to go back and to talk to more people. We are a community, and I want everybody to get that in their damn minds, that we are community. We cannot survive without being a community. So let's give some love to these folks. Support, you know, sometimes you don't even have to do anything with them, but support the places that are trying to help them. There are quite a bit out there. I keep seeing cars drive by all the time. They don't see the in-house that are sitting on the street. They don't even bother to look. This is really messed up. This is not supposed to be the kind of society we live in. We can do a hell of a lot better.
Look at me in the eye. Hear their story. I'm seeing more and more. I left Los Angeles in '79, lived in my car up here for a while.
Mic up.
And I'm seeing more and more. I hate mics. I feel like I'm a projector back when I need to. And I see more and more of that LA mentality coming into our environment as people at stoplights like this, just like this. They're not looking at the side, they're not looking at the little dog in the car next to them, they're not looking at the guy staying on the sidewalk. They are so engrossed in this or this that they won't even make eye contact. Hear their story.
Would you like to talk about how you handled that? Like while you were, actually, let me take one step back. Did you have to deal with any of your own stigma or stereotypes about the community when you started making this movie?
Thanks, Tom. No, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, just honestly, I definitely had to. I had initial stigma ideas going into this project, and you know, one of the best advice I got from some mentors and people I look up to, people who had lived experience that I look up to, was just, I mean, you know, exactly what Rico was saying of like, just listen first. Like, can you just listen? And not just ask the questions, but really hear And yeah, that was, and I mean, again, like, I wish I could, just the three people in this film are amazing. And, you know, Herbert used to be a bodybuilder and won Best Back in Mr. Portland competition. And Bronwyn is a prolific poet and has so many poems I wish I could share. And Jerry, you know, was like on one of the first release teams for the DVD in Boston back in the 70s. And they're all incredibly complex and, you know, have had incredibly just like great lives that could take hours just on one of them. But as far as for taking care of my own mental health, I think, I mean, for me, I've always needed to find time to be like just alone to process it, like get away for an entire Saturday by myself, that I can just kind of digest things, or a weekend. And I think just being, for me, I find honestly a lot of comfort being with people like Bronwyn that can just say something like, we think we're okay, but we're not, you know? And sometimes, like, I think that's what, like, one of the most important parts about a project like this is, like, so much of this film isn't like the filmmakers or this team being like, you know, kind and like shedding a light on these people that are troubled. It's like, there's so much wisdom and compassion and hard-earned knowledge that these three have, that we were honored to get to witness. And so, yeah, I think it's a mix for me of that quiet space and then finding those companions that will be okay with you and walk along the path.
Good. I know we have to wrap up. So I did just want to, since you mentioned Bronwyn, I'm going to bring her up again as the poet. And the poem she reads at the beginning about, that ends with talking about dreaming. In like one word or one phrase, what do you think that she means by that, coming from her, you know, experience? What might that mean to someone like that? Is it more than?
I think I'll just quote Bronwyn again to answer that. And she says in the film that hope is so much more than just a word. For some, it's a lifeline.
Indeed, that is a lifeline. Hope is definitely a lifeline. And dreaming, we should all dream. Dream a better society. Dream a better community. Dream better everything. I'm trying to dream better hair. I'm bald as hell. It's not working.
I was going to say dreaming of sun and no thought would also be nice. What you guys?
I think in Brown's case, when she closed her eyes and thought of dreaming, I think maybe the first thing that hit her head was, it actually happened.
Wow.
It actually happened. That she kept her hope alive. She's going to have that fear she's going to get outed, but in that moment, at that time, her dream came true. And we try to give hope to our clients, we try to give hope to our guests, we try to give them a better eye for tomorrow. Sometimes there's not much to offer, and we're getting less and less to offer. Less food, less shelter, more people, greater need. No in-house addiction programs are available here in town. There's no place where somebody who's on the street can just walk in and say, I want to get clean. There's lines waiting for that. I would imagine that somebody in the throes of addiction, in their tent, on a frozen night, may actually dream about sobriety someday and not having to use that crutch to survive.
Dreaming. Sometimes when I'm dreaming about better things, things I say, if this were the real world, we would have this. Because we're in a nightmare now. Maybe the world that we can dream is more real than the one we're in.
Yep, that's true.
Thank you. That was important to mention at the end, I think. I do hope that many of you are inspired tonight to get involved in some way, in any way. So I do want to mention that this screening is sponsored by Act Now, Lane, a new cross-sector coalition to address our housing and homelessness crisis. There are several members of that group here tonight. You can wave your hands, maybe. If you are interested, after we wrap up, which is now, they're here to talk to. Give your name to, sign out, get involved. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody.
If I may, one more thing. We are in a period of time when we're not growing new advocates. If you're an advocate, find somebody to teach.
I just want to thank Davey for allowing us to watch this incredible movie tonight, for being so generous. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.